Hello there, Salim Omar here from Straight Talk CPAs. I'm joined by Abhi, our senior advisor and CFO. Abhi, welcome.
Hi, Salim. Thank you for having me.
Many business owners want to know one thing about their financial performance. And that one thing is, am I doing well compared to everyone else in my industry? So then they start looking for benchmarks, average gross margins, average operating margins, quartile performance numbers. And at first glance, that seems like a smart thing to do is look at what others in my industry are doing. Because if the average company in your industry has, let's say, a 15% operating margin and you're at 8%, it might look like you have a problem. Here's the issue: industry benchmarks can sometimes give business owners the wrong signal. They can make a healthy business look weak, or they can make a struggling business look acceptable, because two companies can operate in the same industry and they can have completely different economic models. So today we want to talk about why industry benchmarks can be misleading and how smart business owners actually use them.
That's the real thing. So, first thing to understand here is that most benchmarks are averages. They take the financial data from hundreds or thousands of companies and combine them into a single number. But the moment you average different business models together, the insight starts to break down. So, let's take an simple example. Imagine two companies in the same industry, let's say HVAC services. Company A focuses mostly on installing the new systems, whereas Company B focuses on emergency repairs or maintenance contracts. Technically, both of them are HVAC companies, but the economies are very different. Installation work might have a gross margin of around 40 to 45%, whereas the emergency repair work, inherent to the nature of the work, might have a margin closer to 60 to 65%. Now, if you combine those two businesses into one industry benchmark, the average might land somewhere around 50%. But neither business actually operates at that number. So if the installation company compares itself to that 50% benchmark figure, it might think it's underperforming, when in reality, its margins are perfectly healthy for their own business model. That's the first problem with benchmarks. They often compare businesses that are structurally very different.
Makes a lot of sense. Another reason benchmarks can mislead owners is that businesses within the same industry often choose very different strategies. Like some companies compete primarily on price, others compete on specialization, expertise, or premium service. And those choices can affect margins quite dramatically. Yeah, a company that positions itself as the lowest cost provider often has to operate with very thin margins and very high volume just to remain profitable. And that can be a very tough business to run, by the way, because when your margins are thin, even small disruptions, yeah, like rising costs, delayed payments, or a slow quarter can create stress very quickly. So businesses that position themselves around value, expertise, or quality often have room in their margin to absorb volatility. Both approaches can work. They create very different financial realities. So when business owners compare their margins to an industry benchmark, they're often comparing businesses that have made completely different strategic choices. And that's where benchmarks can start to distort the picture.
Exactly, yes. But there's another layer to this conversation that many business owners overlook. Profitability isn't just one number, it's a structure. At the top, you have revenue, then you have gross margin, which tells you how efficiently you deliver your products or services. Then the operating margin, which reflects how well the company controls the overheads. And finally, net profit. When owners focus only on one number, like net profit, they can miss what's actually happening inside the business. For example, a company might have a healthy gross margin, but excessive overheads. Another company might run very lean operations but struggle with pricing or service delivery. Both companies could end up with the same net profit percentage, but the underlying economies of those two businesses could be completely different. Benchmarks usually don't show that nuance. They show the outcome, not the structure that produced it. Other than that, there's another subtle issue with benchmarks. They represent the average, and average isn't really what most entrepreneurs should be aiming for. So there's a concept from Jim Collins' book called Good to Great that applies here. Good can actually become the enemy of the great. If you aim for average industry margins, the best outcome you can hope for is to become average. But the businesses that become truly valuable, the ones that endure over time, usually don't design themselves around industry averages. They design themselves around excellence. They build stronger pricing power. They refine their service mix. They improve operational discipline. And over time, those choices produce margins that are better than the averages. Not because they were chasing the benchmark, but because they built a better business model.
And by the way, I love that book, Good to Great. Good is the enemy, like you said, good is the enemy of great. And businesses should be chasing greatness, not a benchmark. Having said all that, it doesn't mean that benchmarks are useless. They can still be valuable, but only if we treat them as a diagnostic tool rather than targets. So think of benchmarks as signals that help you ask better questions. If your margins are dramatically different from industry ranges, that's worth investigating. But the goal isn't blindly to chase the benchmark. The goal is to understand why the difference exists. Maybe the pricing model is different. Maybe your service mix is different. Maybe your cost structure is heavier because you're investing in growth. So these are like strategic decisions, not necessarily problems. So disciplined businesses focus less on hitting an industry average and more on building a financial structure that supports that strategy.
When we work with business owners who want to improve profitability, the biggest improvement really comes from comparing numbers to industry averages. They usually come from adjusting key few key levers inside the business. For example, pricing set strategy, customer mix, operational efficiency, and cost discipline. Let's say, for example, a relatively small adjustment in pricing can improve margins more than months of cost cutting. Similarly, focusing on higher value clients or services can change the entire margin structure of that business. Those decisions shape profitability far more than simply trying to match an industry benchmark.
Folks, if you take one idea from this conversation, it is this: industry benchmarks can provide useful context, but they should never define how you evaluate the health of your business. Because strong companies aren't built by chasing industry averages, they're built by designing a business model that works financially, operationally, and strategically. And the goal isn't to be average. The goal is to build a disciplined business that can endure, grow, and create long-term value. When that structure is in place, your margins will make sense for your business, not someone else's. Hope, folks, you found this to be useful. If you like this video, feel free to share it, like it, and looking forward to your next video. And Abhi, thanks for sharing your insights.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.